This is an LLD production.
Welcome to this episode of Owlia's Opinions, the podcast in which we take a better look into the world we love, learn new things, and debate the toughest issues the world has in store. I am your host, Armon Owlia. I am a journalism student here at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and it is time to enter the new School of Thought. So everyone, thank you guys so much for listening. A lot to get to in this episode. However, there are a few things I need to get off my chest before we begin. First of all, to a Miss Samantha Van Honk and a Mr. Casey Nordberg, a big, heartfelt Owlia's Opinions congratulations on your engagement and impending matrimonials. I can't wait to see you guys before your big day. Now, on to business regarding the Season 2 finale on December 15th and how we're going to do the show. If everyone remembers how we did the Year of Opinions episode, it's going to be somewhat similar. However, we will start with what you guys thought was the best of the season, with the two musical guests to be determined by you, the listeners, along with a Q&A session as well as some final remarks on how the season I felt went. So, how's it going to happen? Well, if you look in the description, you will see two surveys. One looks at the overall best of the season, while the other looks at the best musical guest. You can even contribute a question that will be answered on the Season 2 finale. The deadline for completing these will be December 8th so that I can actually look at the results and write the show. So don't forget to do the actual surveys. They really will help me. With that being said, let's get started. It is a city of many names. Steel City, Iron City, the City of Bridges, and the City of Champions. However, one name in my mind stands out above the rest. Pittsburgh. A city founded in 1758 by General John Forbes and future President George Washington at the conclusion of the French and Indian War and the evacuation and destruction of Fort Duquesne by French and Native American troops, it is a city that is steeped in so much history, ranging from being the home of your favorite ketchup, mustard, and mayo and Heinz foods, to having the NFL team with the most Super Bowls and arguably the greatest dynasty in American football history with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is also home to some of the greatest artists, philanthropists, philosophers, and writers in American and world history, including Rachel Carson, the Mellon family, Andrew Carnegie, Michael Keaton, Martha Graham, and Mr. Fred Rogers, as well as the one of the most diverse and accepting populations of any city in the United States, as seen in its history as a city and overall sense of cultural acceptance and innovation. Even when the city could have gone to rot with the decline of steel, it transformed and, in 2003, was named the greenest city in America. Pittsburgh, however, in my mind, is highly important for one other major reason. It's my hometown, where I would learn my first lessons in life, where I began to appreciate basic concepts such as love, loyalty, and passion that has driven the city from the get-go. I was born in Pittsburgh and spent my first 9 years growing up in this city, which has been the greatest joy and honor, an experience I do not take for granted. From 1998 to 2007, I lived in this city and made many friends along the way, some of whom, such as Jack with no K and Jordan Smith, were neighbors of mine. Even though I left Pittsburgh in 2007 for Hong Kong, where I would stay for the next decade, my connection to the city never truly went away. In fact, I felt even closer than ever thanks to the development of technology and even returned to the city every now and then. However, the times where I think about Pittsburgh the most are, unfortunately, the times where Pittsburgh is in the news, but for all the wrong reasons. Reasons such as the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue on October 27th, the worst attack on a Jewish community in the United States history. When CNN picked up the news, I knew this would be an international story, and people who had never heard of Pittsburgh before and didn't understand Pittsburgh the way I and many others do may be afraid to visit or even live there. Pittsburgh as a whole is one of the most tolerant cities that I know of that is not a major hub, such as New York and Los Angeles. Despite that, it holds a few world records and distinctions in history, such as being the city with the most bridges in the world, having the polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk, who was working at the University of Pittsburgh, being the birthplace of the emoticon, which was the predecessor to the emoji, for those who don't know, and even the beginning of one of the most famous expeditions in American history, that of Lewis and Clark. So yeah, it's a historic city. However, you can be the most historic city and have a generally lousy attitude. Pittsburgh is one of the exceptions to that rule, especially when entering Pittsburgh's famous Strip District in the center of downtown Pittsburgh. It's a cornucopia of cultural diversity with shopping and food galore. However, one of the best things about the city is the easygoing nature of the residents. You can literally have a conversation while purchasing pasta or ordering breakfast. The two places I would personally recommend is Pamela's Diner, where President Obama has breakfast whenever visiting Pittsburgh, and La Prima Espresso Company. And then for lunch, only one option. Primanti's, the classic Pittsburgh sandwich shop made famous by Pittsburgh's even more famous... Well, I'll talk about it now. There's another thing in Pittsburgh that you must do, and it goes back to a common saying I use with my friends back home. The only places you will find people in Pittsburgh when any of the three teams, Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins, are playing will be either in the stadium at the game, at a sports bar watching the game, or at home watching the game. In other words, if you want to understand the fighting spirit and love of Pittsburgh, go to one of the sports games, in particular those of the Penguins and Steelers, because you will get more than your money's worth. Sorry, Pirates. Plus, there's not one person in Pittsburgh who is unaware of what goes on within the sports world there. I remember even while shopping in the Strip District going and discussing at length the results of a Pittsburgh Pirates baseball game, emphasizing the abilities of then team captain Andrew McCutchen, who is a major hero in the city. However, I digress. Pittsburgh is definitely an amazing city, one that lives up to the hype. A city full of life and character, one that is great for kids to grow up in, and a place I cannot wait personally to go back to. Whenever you get the chance, go and visit. I promise you, it'll be the journey of your life. Just ask someone who's been fortunate enough to live there. So what do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree? Either way, please go to www.lovelanddebate.com, click on the Love tab, and you will find the article there. Put any questions and thoughts in the comments section. So, we are going to take a short break. When we come back after the song by Maisie, we will be talking about one of my top 5 favorite films and why it may be more relevant than ever. We'll be back after this.
Tell me that I won't go back. I wanna be grown like that. I wanna be grown like that. You know that I've been on track. Feel it in my bones like that. Being on my own like that. I know I've been so fine, no lie. Now I'm on my own. I don't think twice. I fight for my light. Sit here on my throne. It didn't hurt when I let it go. And I learned how to walk the lonely road. It twists and turns like vertigo. When bridges burn, I watch afterglow. Another game of show and tell, thinking that they know me well. Never buying what they sell. They're saying that I fell from grace when I was given just a taste. But maybe I was just misplaced. I know I've been so fine, no lie. Now
everybody that I meant to call to send you a message, but it went ringing, so I will just leave you a message like that. So, hope you're doing alright, hope all is well, hope you're happy and you have the best experience ever.
It didn't hurt when I let it go, and I learned how to walk the lonely road. It twists and turns like vertigo. When bridges burn, I watch the afterglow.
More importantly, I love you. Bye.
So that was Afterglow by Maisie, and I thought that this was actually a very solid song. I met her at the Root Cellar venue in Philadelphia, which is run by a friend of mine and someone who has followed this podcast since the beginning. And I will say, I was very thoroughly impressed by her. The EP in general has a nice vibe and is something I was easily able to relax to. Maisie definitely has a very strong future based solely on how she did here. Well done. Again, this was Afterglow by Maisie. Her most recent EP, OMW, is available on iTunes and Spotify. All links will be in the description. It's amazing to see how many films that many found terrible actually cross over into being considered cinematic classics, especially those with an amazing cast, an ingenious mind who wrote, produced, and directed the work, a great soundtrack, and on top of it all, an amazing story to go along with it. This is one of those films. On October 23, 1998, Gary Ross, the driving writing force behind two cult classic commentary comedies in Big and Dave, released his directorial debut in a film that he both wrote and produced, Pleasantville. Despite earning a meager $8.9 million in its opening weekend, going on to become a box office bomb, it would be heavily celebrated by many film critics, including the late Siskel and Ebert, Peter M. Nichols in the New York Times, and Entertainment Weekly. It would be nominated for 3 Academy Awards, all of them technical. However, it would not become a cult classic film until it was released on VHS. Since 1998, the film, as much of a classic as it is, has dropped into obscurity, briefly gaining relevancy again after one of its main cast members, Paul Walker, sadly passed away, with fans using his performance as a tribute. However, I bring this film up not only because it's on my personal top 5 films ever made list, but also it's my belief that the film is actually more relevant thematically today than it was 20 years ago. So what is the story, you may ask? Well, try to follow me here. It's a bit complicated. The film centers around 2 teens, a brother and sister, played by Tobey Maguire, who is best known as the original film Spider-Man, and future Academy Award winner Reese Witherspoon. Maguire's character, David, is the classic 90s nerd who, for most of his day, lazily watches TV, especially a 1950s sitcom called Pleasantville, which is, well, amazingly cheesy and non-threatening, with, quote, classic American values and family roles, such as the mother being a housewife, the father being the breadwinner, the kids being essentially perfect, and the highest amount of intimacy is holding hands. In short, every sitcom made during the 1950s. However, I digress. David's knowledge of the show is amazingly strong, becoming a fanboy as a means of escape from his mother's messy divorce. Witherspoon's character, Jennifer, however, is the exact opposite. She's the cool girl who cares more for boys and having sex than actually doing well in school, often being mortified to be caught dead with her brother. On one particular night, David wants to watch a marathon in Pleasantville, while Jennifer wants to watch a concert on MTV with a boy. In the resulting argument, their TV remote breaks, leading to a mysterious TV repairman, played by the legendary late comedian Don Knotts, quizzing David's knowledge of Pleasantville. When David gets all the questions right, including a trick question, the Knotts character then gives David a remote that, in another argument between the two, zaps David and Jennifer from the 90s into the 1950s, taking on the roles of the kids of that series, Bud and Mary Sue Parker. So now they are living in Pleasantville, with the catch that they cannot reveal who exactly they are at any time to any citizen and must adhere to the lives and expectations of 50s America. Now, the world of this is very much different. There is no fire. There are only 2 roads in Pleasantville. Everybody is essentially perfect. There's no real change in routine. Everyone does the same day-to-day things. But safe to say, Jennifer disobeys this order, introducing sex into the world of Pleasantville with her date Skip, played by Paul Walker. Slowly, the black and white world of Pleasantville becomes color, with the perfect supposed paradise of Pleasantville beginning to fall apart through allegories of the civil rights movement, such as the usage of the word colored to describe those who have changed, the feminism movement through Joan Allen, who is the mother in this, walking out on her husband William H. Macy after he ordered her to do something she didn't want to do, and, through a book burning scene, Nazism. In the end, both characters drastically change, with Jennifer thoroughly embracing the need not to be popular and really more to be yourself, and David drastically gaining the confidence needed to date one of the girls in the Pleasantville universe. In other words, David pretty much adopts what should be going in the 90s, and Jennifer adopts the 50s, and that makes them both very balanced people. So safe to say, this is a film that is very much multi-layered. It takes a few viewings to even see all of the little nuances. However, there are a few details I want to bring up. First, the perfect duality in having the kids be from the 90s, which at that point was the raunchiest, most dangerous, and information-filled era in American history, through subjects such as the greater embrace of feminism and the AIDS crisis, and the premise of the sitcom within the film taking place in the 1950s, which is as sanitized as it comes, with no real mentions of sex and women being stuck in the kitchen as housewives or props. Two different environments that actually mix together beautifully, as seen with the development of both the characters. Next, the use of black and white and transformation with color, which is very much appropriate because of the change from the 1950s going into pretty much the 1960s, which was the same thing you saw on television. In particular, the one aspect that granted Pleasantville color in the first place: change. When each of the characters changed and experienced something that was not part of their natural character and that changed them for the better, that's when they experienced color. For many of the characters, it was sex, experiencing something completely new and foreign to them that changed them positively, as well as the usage of reading, with the two most popular places for the teens in this universe being Lover's Lane and the Pleasantville Public Library, where the books literally would go from blank to full the more the people want to learn. However, as said in the movie, especially within the case of Jennifer or Mary Sue Parker and David or Bud Parker, that wasn't the case. In Jennifer's case, it was when she actually refused sex and opened up a part of her that was ambitious and wanted to learn and read rather than engaged, then opened up a color. In David's, however, it was because throughout most of the film, he stuck to the script, acting in a, quote, pleasant manner. However, when a group of non-colorized citizens tried to attack his mother, David punched one of them in the face and yelled at them, breaking away from his own character. The mayor, Big Bob, played by the late J.T. Walsh, was the last one, breaking away from his own pleasant manner, which thinly veiled his prejudicial feelings, and yelling in anger, revealing the ugliness underneath and showing his color. I could go on and on, especially in the behavior of the Don Knotts character, who, if you think about it, is testing David in particular, who goes from wanting to get out of Pleasantville to wanting to stay and help Pleasantville change, despite all the resistance being brought up by Knotts' TV repairman character. In the end, however, I think that the change was something that the Knotts character wanted the show and the kids to go through. However, that's just another detail in a film full of them. In this age of conservatism and progressivism, as well as a fear of a changing world, this film has taken on a new life of its own, showing how change can be a positive driving force, and how, as scary as it is, it shouldn't be looked upon with fear, but rather with hope. If you ever get about 3 hours to do something, I recommend watching this. It's a wonderful piece of film that will make the colors in your life a little brighter. So what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree? Either way, please go to www.loveanddebate.com, click on the Learn tab, and you'll find the article there. Put any questions and thoughts in the comments section. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back after this song by Drift, I'll close out the show by talking about a genuine concern that has been slowly arising amongst the Democrats, one that is normally not talked about. And now, some final thoughts. A debate to start at the end of this program. When Barack Obama was elected as the 44th President of the United States on November the 4th, 2008, it would have been difficult to predict how much the country would change. Not only within 8 years would healthcare become more accessible to the more members of the public, not only would people within the LGBTQ+ community have greater and more equal rights, including the right to marry, but also the image and views of the two dominant political parties would be drastically altered, especially that of the Republican Party. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly when that change began. Some say it could have been the result of former Texas Representative Ron Paul's failed 2008 presidential bid. Others say it was truly set on fire when Obama was elected as the first African American to hold the office of president. However, one thing is clear. The Tea Party began as an understandable movement of hostility to an environment that was not exactly the best towards middle-class America, to say nothing of lower-class America led by Republicans, due to Democrats controlling both the House and Senate at that time. At that time, the Dow Jones and the U.S. economy had been experiencing the worst recession in its history since the Great Depression in 1929. The unemployment rate was increasing, companies were shutting down, and many executives were making money whilst cheating their customers through tax loopholes. Understandable and justifiable. However, as their size grew and their problem became more obvious, plus the fact that an African American was being elected to the highest office in the land, the opposing party, the Republicans, were going to try and stack the deck against him, starting the radicalization of the modern-day Republican Party with that of the silent minority of neo-Nazis and Klan members who vote as Republicans. Add in the fact that monetary influential businessmen and organizations such as the Koch brothers and Citizens United were putting money into these organizations to swing their policies their way, and it created a monster that would become very difficult to stop, with very strong rhetoric regarding how, if you didn't agree with them, you were not a true American or even loving the United States, but hating its government, as well as common buzz phrases like repealing the 14th Amendment that was popular already with the alt-right. From the 2010 midterms to 2016, when Donald Trump would be elected, the Tea Party was able to get more of their candidates to unseat Republicans and Democrats who had been closer to the center, including Scott Brown as a Massachusetts senator, Mike Lee as a senator in Utah, and Tim Scott, who would become a representative of South Carolina. However, there would be no truly central voice that would lead the movement for some time, which was the biggest hurdle in trying to unseat Obama with Mitt Romney. Even conservative media such as Fox News, which had still been palatable by many, began to follow suit, with an increase of calling President Obama a fascist and communist, blaming him instead of a divided House and Senate for why nothing was getting done, when fundamental policies were being passed, giving unlimited positive coverage to members of the Tea Party rather than a fair and balanced view on Washington. As the years went by, and the longer Obama was in office, the stronger the kinetic energy became for a red wave, which eventually came with the election of Trump and what has happened since. While this change has been happening with the Republicans, however, many people have failed to notice or have just tried to ignore that, even slightly before the election of Trump, a very similar change has been occurring within the Democratic Party. In particular, with the Democrats' progressive movement, which can be classified as the far left or alt-left, depending on how you see it. They were responding to bad trends within the Republican Party that had tried to block Obama from making even bigger changes and tried cutting him at the knees, as well as the rising leadership that was sexist, racist, misogynistic, xenophobic, and nationalistic, especially in the rise of a de facto leader of the Tea Party who would go on to win the 2016 presidential election to determine Obama's successor. The election of Trump just made things much worse, as the Democrats had no definitive leadership after the loss of Hillary Clinton, and as such, went with those who came after Trump the most, such as Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Keith Ellison, and most notably, Bernie Sanders, all of whom pushed for strong economic reform that would break up the big banks and potentially financially devastate America in the long term. However, it appealed to a new generation of millennials, who, after watching Hillary Clinton win in the primaries, would either decide to vote third party or not at all. Now, we have CNN, who has been focusing more on Trump's numerous errors and lies than in actually reporting the news, apart from a few reporters such as Anderson Cooper and Christiane Amanpour. And now, in the midterms, few Tuesdays ago, we have primarily progressivist candidates who have followed in the shadow of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to the point where they are campaigning for them. Is the pattern clear? The Democrats have created their own version of the Tea Party. However, they have moved in the opposite direction, going to the left instead of right, rather than staying in the center. If they follow this trend too, Donald Trump will be elected for a second term, as there is no true definitive voice in the Democratic camp, and as such, they would get run over by Trump, who, despite his faults, will still go down as a somewhat successful president due to economic and job growth. Then in 2024, the president will become a left-leaning Democrat who will end up pushing this country further toward the brink of destruction. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, this is a trend that needs to not only be recognized, but stopped immediately, as in the incoming 116 Congress. Already, reports from sources such as Bloomberg and the Washington Post have described this new Democratic-led House as, quote, vengeful and dangerous. However, what will need to happen is not to play politics, but rather become the center, moving away from progressivism and more monetarism, trying to come to compromises with their fellow representatives in the Republican camp. If the end game, too, is to install a Democrat in the White House in 2020, the Democrats need to find moderate leaders to speak on behalf of the party. Luckily, the Democrats do have these voices in the party, such as current Democratic candidate for president, Maryland Representative John Delaney, Montana Governor Steve Bullock, and former Vice President Joe Biden, all of whom have had a consistent track record of being both moderate and highly respected by both their party and the Republicans. On top of that, Democrats and the rest of the media cannot constantly trash Trump at every turn on the campaign trail to 2020, as tempting as it may be, or call the Republicans evil. That would make Democrats hypocritical of behavior by the Tea Party that was called out in the last decade. And at this point, the Democrats need to operate with the goal of being almost a moral center, rather than discrediting Trump. Let Trump discredit himself with repeats of prior comments about his racist, misogynistic, bigoted ways. Politics has always worked best when the political parties are closer to the center than they are at opposite ends of the spectrum. If nothing is done now, when there is still time, it just may be too late. So what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree? Either way, please go to www.loveanddebate.com, click on the debate section, and respond, please. And while you're at it, don't forget to like us on Facebook by going to www.facebook.com/loveanddebate. Follow us on Twitter @loveanddebate. Follow us on our Instagram page @loveanddebate. Subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Don't forget to give us a review. 5-star would be amazing. And go to Redbubble if you want to purchase any show merchandise. My thanks to Omi Larijani for the graphics and show soundtrack, Maisie and Drift with a special thanks to Matt Coakley for their amazing musical contributions to the show, and Hilary Lau and Lola Heffernan for their tremendous generosity and lending their voices. That's it for this week. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks ready to go. Thank you guys for listening, and until next time, keep loving, keep learning, keep debating. We'll see you next time on Owlia's Opinions. Goodbye.
This has been an LLD production, recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.